What's up, my dudes, and welcome to every A24 movie on Blu-ray. I'm Steven. I'm here, as always, with my co-hosts, Chris.
Hi.
And Patrick.
Hello.
Surprise.
Doing something a little different this week and for the foreseeable future in solidarity with the WGA and SAG. We are not watching The Thing this week, as we promised.
You
so
thought
sorry.
it was going to be The Thing, but surprise, it's something else. Isn't that appropriate?
Indeed. Yeah, we are here this week to watch the A24 film that is only marginally horror and isn't available on Netflix. Ari Aster's third feature, BEAU is Afraid. Chris, how did we get here?
Well, yeah, as I'm sure most of our listeners are aware, there's been Hollywood strikes going on. We had the WGA go on strike, SAG-AFTRA joined them afterwards, and Hollywood shut down. And at the center of the issues of negotiation are streaming providers and the benefits that they're giving or not giving to the people who make their content. And Netflix especially has been in the crosshairs of the strike. So as the strike continues and escalates, we've been trying to figure out how we can support them and show solidarity with them. And for various reasons and some soul searching, it no longer felt appropriate to continue actively promoting Netflix as a streamer as it is. And so instead of, suspending the show, we figured, well, we could pivot hard to the A24 catalog, because A24 has been not targeted by the strike, at least the SAG-AFTRA strike, because they have been, they're an independent studio that's not part of the producer association that is being negotiated with. And they have apparently acquiesced to what the union has been asking for. So no more Netflix. We're done with Netflix. We're watching only A24 horror movies and not on streaming. So that's how we got here.
We lucked out that BEAU is Afraid is not yet available on streaming. You got to pay to see this thing. And I think A24 has a decent enough model that money is going to the creators.
Maybe.
We can hope.
It's the least we can do, and everyone's got to decide, what's right for them. This seemed like a good compromise for us, but solidarity with everyone striking, and hopefully they get everything they ask for very soon, because these fucking streamers, they're trying to destroy the business. They're going to destroy art. Okay. If they have their way, everyone's going to get uploaded into a fucking AI, and you're going to pay $40 a month for Netflix that you can use on one device. And it's going to look like Jib Jab cartoons from 2004 with your favorite actor's AI deepfake face grafted onto some algorithmically designed bullshit. And enough is enough.
Well, I think it's important to stress this is a temporary change. When the actors, the writers are happy, so are we, and we'll go back to our usual bullshit.
Well, I mean, we'll see. We'll see if Netflix survives all this, but I can tell you, rest assured, your boys haven't changed, and the format of the show will be very similar to what we've always done. We're going to continue to provide you with quality content that you can rest easy after listening to.
If you like your spoiler room, you can keep it.
And we're actually going to do something on top of what Chris and Steven just described. We're also going to bring you something a little special at the end of this episode, between this episode and next episode. One of the things that really bothered me the most as I've been reading about the strike situation is, I believe this was an anonymous comment that I saw somewhere from someone at one of the studios who said they want this strike to go on until writers start losing their apartments. And this was before SAG went on strike, but it really, suffice to say, disturbed and upset me that these fuckers are willing to hold out until people's lives start being completely overturned So what we'd like to do is use this moment to throw a little money the way of some folks, writers, actors, others in the entertainment industry who are striking and who need it right now. So for our next episode, normally we'd have the Wheel of Death pick our next film, but we're going to auction off that right to you, the listening audience, and we're going to donate whatever money you all raise, all of it. We're not going to take a penny. We're going to donate it to the Entertainment Community Fund, which is a nonprofit that's actually been around since the 1800s. That was one of the interesting things I learned about that as I was researching it. But it supports the entertainment industry. They have an emergency assistance fund right now, and actors who are in immediate need, as in about to lose their housing or otherwise have their lives thrown into turmoil, can apply for a grant from this fund. So the money is going to go to help writers, actors, folks in the industry who need it. So keep an eye on the socials for that so that you can pick our next movie and also help us send some money towards folks who really need it right now.
Right on. Well, before we get into the main feature, we always like to do a little catch up. And I'll go ahead and start this time, actually, because I watched another A24 horror movie in between episodes. I caught Talk to Me. Did either of you catch up with that in theaters by any chance?
No.
Not yet.
I'm glad to see it's doing really well. It's made about 40 million on a $5 million budget. That's pretty cool. This is an Australian movie made by the Philippou brothers. I forget their names. They're known as YouTube pranksters Raka Raka. And this is kind of a boilerplate premise about a sort of seance, light as a feather, stiff as a board type of game that teens play, but with a pretty cruel twist and some interesting themes of course, grief, because it's an A24 movie, but it also touches on drug abuse and drug addiction in a really interesting way. I would give this a Q it, but I enjoyed myself. I thought it was a little uneven, but there's some good scares, some good surprises in it. And I will just say, if you're thinking of going to the bathroom during this movie, don't do it whenever anyone's in a hospital, because I missed the 5 best seconds of the movie, apparently. A shot that people have been trying to describe to me that I cannot find any screen grabs of on the internet, and it sounds pretty wild. What have y'all been up to, horror-wise or otherwise?
I've been making my way through Ray Bradbury's Something Wicked This Way Comes, which I strangely have never read, even though I'm a big fan of Bradbury and have read, really most of his notable books, I think, other than Something Wicked, at the recommendation of one of our faithful Amon fans, actually my sister, shout out, Brenna, borrowed her copy and have been really enjoying that. Although I will say it's contributing a little bit to... it's been very cloudy in Michigan lately, and I'm getting this like sinking feeling that fall is coming sooner than my little summer brain can really handle. And this is a fall-ass book. It's a Halloween-ass book. So I'm enjoying it very much, but it's also contributing a little bit to my alarm about summer disappearing. But I guess that's just more credit to Bradbury and his delightful writing. So been enjoying that and really looking forward to tracking down the movie too, because I hear it's pretty decent.
Yeah, Jonathan Pryce is in that. He plays I forget the character's name, but he plays the ringleader of the carnival. He's fucking awesome.
Yeah,
perfect.
Mr. Dark.
Yes. Oh my God, it's been so long since I've read that.
Well, we have some bad news. This happened after we recorded our last episode, I think, but before we put it out. William Friedkin died. Known to us as producer, director, and host of The Devil and Father Amort. And I watched a documentary available on Hoopla, which is a great, speaking of nonprofit streamers, Hoopla, your local library probably has access to it, free streaming. They have Friedkin Uncut, which is a documentary about William Friedkin centered on mostly on a interview with Friedkin and sort of a retrospective of his filmography too. We have to issue a correction because when we reviewed The Devil and Father Amort, we talked a lot about, isn't it cute how this, acclaimed cinematic director is trying his hand at a little documentary. William Friedkin started out making documentaries. And he made a documentary called The People versus Paul Crump, about a death row inmate in the 60s, 1962, and this documentary got Paul Crump exonerated and off of death row.
Wow.
And he said it was then that he learned, he was like, if my shitty film could save a man's life, then I was just so in awe of the power of cinema. So good for him. But he's passed on now. Very sad. So I watched that documentary to help remember him, and what a personality, what a force, what a career, and a man with very interesting philosophies on filmmaking too. Like he preferred to only do one take of anything, which is kind of crazy. R.I.P.
R.I.P. man.
I think the trailer for the new Exorcism reboot is probably what did him in, but
Ugh.
It definitely contributed to
it. Almost killed me when I saw
somehow.
it before Oppenheimer or whatever it was.
Dude, I didn't even know that was coming when we went to see Oppenheimer. Somehow I hadn't even seen anything else about it on social media, and we walked in, I think, just after it started, and I was like, is this... was my reaction.
It looks so upsettingly like it carries on kind of the same formula as David Gordon Green's his other horror remake reboot travesty, the Halloween movies. Oh my God, it looks...
I mean, I would probably be more inclined to give it a shot if not for the fucking shit show of all those Halloween movies. But yeah. Anyways, R.I.P. William Friedkin.
R.I.P. William Friedkin. So can't imagine you guys were too pleased when you found out that we were going to be watching BEAU is Afraid for this episode.
You know, I was actually kind of happy because I wanted to go see it the entire time I was in theaters because I love Ari Aster. But it was just like, and this persisted into once it actually arrived on video streaming, whatever, it was still just like, I have such a hard time psyching myself up to watch any 3-hour movie, literally any well, actually, no, not literally. Avengers Endgame, I'll watch that any fucking time. But at most any other 3-hour movie, I'm like, So it was nice to actually like be assigned it.
Yeah, I've been meaning to see it too, and it was good to actually be forced to watch it because it's been on my list, but it was probably going to be years before I actually sat my ass down and watched Ari Aster's latest.
Yeah.
But hey, it took me like 6 years to watch Midsummer, so.
Well, especially having heard like that it was sort of this surreal, ambling, perhaps comedy, perhaps adventure, perhaps horror film, and that people were a little nonplussed by it in some cases. It wasn't like I had heard, wow, this is a fucking blast of a movie. So there weren't a ton of incentives to actually see it. So thanks for giving me one.
The buzz was not good. It's not like when I saw the 3-hour movie, The Aviator, 2 weeks ago and told everybody I know they need to drop what they're doing and see it immediately.
I won't say the buzz felt bad to me. It just sounded like a complicated and sort of difficult film, you know, not like a fun film.
And also, like, here's the thing. Ari Aster, I like Ari Aster. I think he's extremely talented. But on the basis of Hereditary and Midsummer, I didn't feel like I needed him to do a 3-hour passion project. You know, like, I feel like he still needs an editor, and maybe even Hereditary and Midsummer could have used an editor.
He needs an editor and a better therapist if he already has one. We are sponsored today by BetterHelp. Enter the code AMON for 3 free sessions. Ari, looking at you. The plot to this movie is ostensibly pretty simple. I think the description online is like one sentence. This is about a kind of slovenly middle-aged man who lives in a nearly war-torn ghetto who's having a mental health crisis.
Eventually he goes on live TV with Robert De Niro. He paints his face like a clown.
We'll put a bookmark there because that is something I want to bring up.
Yeah. Anyway, his domineering mother is expecting a visit from him. He's trying to get home to his mom, and he gets derailed in every conceivable fashion you can possibly imagine, and even plenty that you probably couldn't imagine.
It's like Superbad.
A little bit. I was thinking maybe more like It's have you guys ever seen After Hours, the Scorsese
Yeah,
movie?
yeah.
It's a little bit like that. It's like one of those one bad day sort of movies that young film students make. And I have it on good authority that Ari Aster started writing this movie when he is fairly young, but he wrote it when he was quite young, probably still in college. And it got a lot of that sort of feel to it of, let's test the audience's patience with how much weird shit we can pack into one movie, one character, and an abbreviated time frame.
And this movie is bananas. It's hard to talk about. It's hard to summarize. It's hard to, certainly a fool's errand to try to really explain what happens in this movie. Every scene, every moment, after the first couple minutes, which are pretty buttoned down, is just insane and darkly comic at every turn and surreal and clearly not set in a objective reality.
Right.
And it's a movie that largely leaves it up to you to figure out what all this means, if anything.
It's highly episodic.
Yes.
It's episodic, and almost every scene is a different set piece,
Yes.
Like almost every scene kind of works in its own self-contained way as like a short film about something going horribly, horribly wrong to this poor guy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there are probably 6 or 7 kind of main sort of chapters to this. They're all very different, almost feel different genres at times.
I would say there are 5 distinct sections of this movie, and you're right. They each feel not quite like they were directed by a different person, but they have a completely different tone.
And I kind of love that.
Yeah.
If nothing else, I admire this film for its ambition. I don't know about its intentions, and we will get very deep into that at some point. But, why don't we start at the beginning, which I thought is the most enjoyable, or at least the most consistently fun and hilarious section of this movie, which is just kind of BEAU's everyday life in this horrible ghetto that he lives in above a peep show. And even something as simple as going across the street to get a glass of water turns into a complete fiasco.
I mean, even something as simple as taking his pill before that. The reason he goes across the street is he has a new prescription. He puts the pill in his mouth and then flips the fuck out because the water is off in his apartment. So then it prompts this arduous journey across the street to get water. Every little thing he attempts to do is just a Herculean task, basically.
Yeah, it should be noted that his therapist makes it clear, as well as the medication bottle, that it must be taken with water. And I found even that to be completely hilarious. What an arbitrary instruction that has such grave implications.
Well, and it's funny because, and I mean, this is going to be a theme for me. This movie reminded me so intensely of my own struggles with anxiety. And this is literally something I've thought about. There are those medications or vitamins, whatever, that are drink this with a full glass of water. Must be drank with, at least 8 ounces of water. And I've never gotten quite as stressed about it as BEAU has, but I'm like, what if I only drink it with 4 ounces of water? Will I be okay? So even that was just the start of a long string of things that were oddly relatable to me in this movie.
Yeah, I'd be curious to hear more about your perception of all that, because kind of one of the central jokes of the movie, especially the first half of the movie, I would say, but even more particularly this first act, is BEAU's reality is manifesting everything you could possibly be anxious about happening all at once. It's like because as a character, BEAU is afraid. He's afraid of all kinds of things, rational or irrational. And whatever you could possibly be afraid about, he's extremely preoccupied with, but also it's happening very literally.
Yeah. He can't even walk home safely from his therapist appointment, which we got to talk about his therapist. What is the name of the actor?
He's played the priest in Lady Bird. That's all I know.
Oh, yeah.
I got to look his name up. This guy is fucking awesome.
While you look that up, though, I want to follow up on what Chris just said, because it kind of touches on my read of this entire movie, which is not to say, it's kind of like a Chris reading of one of the movies, or I'm not necessarily saying this is what Ari intended or what his creative process was, but this reminded me strongly of in therapy when, you're talking about anxious thoughts, and the therapist common strategy is usually they say, okay, well, follow that thing you're worried about. Like, what happens if the thing you're worried about happens? And then what happens after that? And then, like, follow it all the way to its conclusion. And usually the result, of course, the intended result is you go, okay, this is wild. I'm getting way too fantastical in my thinking. And you usually reach some kind of absurd conclusion in the end. And I feel like that was this feels like that was the narrative approach in structuring this screenplay, was like, keep taking it to the most absurd end for this character. And I mean, that's pretty much where this all winds up too.
It's like if you go through that chain of events, but it literally happens to him instead of him just reciting it to Stephen McKinley Henderson is the name of the actor who plays the therapist, who is just so perfect. I mean, I don't know if either of you two relate to this, but I've had a couple of therapists that are just a little too cheerful. no matter how like dire your circumstances might feel to you, where they're always smiling and nodding. He has a notebook, kind of classic. And during the entire session, he literally only writes down one thing, which is the word guilty. Yeah. which is a major theme of the movie. That BEAU is just riddled with guilt because he can never seem to please his mom, even when she asks the simplest things of him, like just coming out to visit.
Which, and again, kind of fits into how I see it as being like, this is, BEAU's subjective reality. And in his head, that's the only thing his therapist is thinking about. The only takeaway for the therapist from this session is that he is guilty. And obviously you can read that in various ways too. Not only that he feels guilt, but that he is guilty of something. His therapist thinks he is guilty of something.
That's interesting, because I rewatched the first few minutes of this movie. I think this is a movie that you would get a lot more from watching it a second time. Well, Steven did watch it a second time, so you can correct me.
And I can tell you, I got nothing more out of it. It is as shallow as the first time.
Okay.
So if you're don't try too hard with this one.
There are some cute moments of foreshadowing going on. But yeah, I watched the beginning the reason I rewatched the beginning is because I wanted to take note of when and why things go off the rails and how the movie started, because the therapist scene at first glance, at least, seems very normal. And even when he leaves, it sort of starts to ramp up from there. And I was like, is this like, I'm sure it's nothing as literal as like, oh, he's on the new medication and that's what's causing any of this. But I was trying to like feel out that point where things got weird. But now you're making me think that it was weird from the get-go. And that is that when he writes guilty, it's still his anxiety about what his therapist is doing or thinking.
Yeah, I think it's definitely weird from the get-go.
It's totally weird from the get-go, but it does ramp up once he takes the medication. At least that was my read the second time through.
I mean, if you want to point out sort of a catalyst, the movie literally starts with his first-person experience of being born, which is horrifying, and he gets dropped on his head, I think, right? As soon as he is born. So, if anything, that may be the catalyst for all this.
Yes. Yes, I do like a good blurry being born sequence. But yeah, I really admire the approach, and I thought it was a very charming gimmick to have this sort of all these anxieties happening, and none of it makes any sense except that you get on board pretty early with sort of what they're doing. And Ari Aster continues to be, I'm not going to use any superlative language, but he is a masterful director.
He directs the fuck out of this movie.
I don't always like what he's trying to do, but he directs the shit out of this. And there's no reason to be critical or cynical of his style. He's a master. I always hope his next movie is gonna be better than his last movie.
Just what he does with like there are so many like big ensemble shots in this movie. There are lots of quiet moments as well. But in like the first chapter where Bo is kind of in and around his apartment and all of the terrifying things that happen both in the building and on the street. I mean, there are times that I thought of like Jacques Tati as much as I
Oh
thought of
yeah.
Scorsese, like with what he's doing with all of the background details. I will say that is something I was able to pick up more of on the second viewing, especially being able to like pause it and kind of look around and see all the
Mhm.
dumb dick jokes that are written on things in the background and all of that. But there's like at any point there's like 60 performers doing something completely different, independent of each other. And Aster does a great job of making that feel kinetic and exciting and capturing the chaos of it all.
It's a hilarious movie, at least for the first
Yeah.
2 hours or so. I laughed my ass off. He had me right where he wanted me. The thing I was going to say about Joker is Joaquin Phoenix is such a good actor, but I'm getting a little tired of him playing this guy who like just
Yes.
doesn't talk and
Yep.
murmurs.
Yep.
Well, okay, that I felt like was when we were talking about like what's the catalyst, when do things get really crazy? It's when he takes the medication that he seems to lose all ability to like speak or stand up for himself or anything, and he just mumbles for the rest of the fucking movie, and it's so annoying. It's so hard to watch characters who are like just seemingly helpless, and for so long. I just
I
wanted to
feel
like reach in and grab him and slap him around a bit.
I feel like he got lost in the character of himself when he did that I'm Still Here or whatever it's called like 10, 15 years ago, and he was playing like the weird like spaced out version of himself. And I think, and I mean, I'm half joking, but also it kind of feels like he never really looked back from that just like spaced out, like mumbly kind of thing. I mean, he is still a great actor. He's done great performances since then. And I mean, I think he's even good in this, but yeah, I am a little tired of the just the weird way he talks.
Yeah.
He makes some pretty bold choices in this for sure, and he's fully committed to it. He does what's asked of him, and there are times where I actually thought like, I may not like this character, but I don't understand how you inhabit that headspace as an actor and commit to it so hard.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's one shot that really stood out to me toward the end of the movie, and I won't describe the circumstances, where I was like, I actually don't think I really noticed it the first time, or if I did, it just kind of blew past me. But there's an entire long shot where he's walking toward the camera at night, and he just has this pained look of horror on his face that's completely frozen.
Yes.
You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. That's a
Oh
great
yeah. Oh yeah, that's great.
Like, what a choice. And he doesn't return to it. In the next shot, after it cuts, he's like, as normal as his character could possibly be again, and as expressive.
Mhm.
Yeah, his mouth is agape, his eyes are like bugging out. That was I like leaned in towards my TV screen to like try and confirm what I was seeing, because it was so almost cartoonish looking.
Yeah. It's not a horror film. We should say that.
Well,
There's a lot of horror in it though, man.
Yeah, there's a lot of horror. There's a monster in this. There's a naked serial stabber roaming the streets.
Yeah, but all right. So there's a few points. It's fun because I'm trying to think of who else. Well, James Wan did this, and he does this like in Aquaman, especially. This happens where like you're watching a superhero movie, and then they go in the deep sea trench, and you're like, oh wait, yeah, it's James Wan's here with his kit of tools and his red lights and his monsters and stuff. Same sort of thing happens in this movie where it's all like. There's some eerie stuff, and then every now and then like he takes you to hereditary land and then like pulls the punch though.
Yeah.
And it's kind of fun.
I mean, yeah, there's stuff that feels more like traditionally horror on the face of it, but again, just like the anxiety of this and the way he turns even just simple interactions, like domestic interactions, into weirdly deeply unsettling things, flavored by Beau's anxiety, practically the whole thing feels like a horror movie one way or another to me. And I mean, the genre it's all over the place for sure, but it pretty much the whole thing feels like horror in some way to me.
Yeah, but it
makes me
funny.
feel horror, you know.
It's funny though, because it's often like, oh, look at this thing that's going wrong, and you see how afraid BEAU is of it, and that's funny.
Yeah, well, it goes back to the therapy
thing
I was saying, like reducing the anxiety to absurdity, you know. Yeah. But it's constantly just like living on that tightrope where you can feel his revulsion and fear about everything, but also I don't know, it's so weird because it lives in both worlds where you can see how ridiculous it is, but also feel his paranoia and fear about everything, which again, very relatable for me.
I relate on a lot of levels, but I think like one thing that allowed me to sort of distance myself from the film is the fact that BEAU is just so comically pathetic. You know, on some level, I can appreciate being that anxious, but there's kind of I felt a sense of remove and maybe even catharsis knowing that like I'm supposed to laugh at this guy the entire way through. I'm never really supposed to feel pity for him.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's fine.
Yeah, I think you're supposed to feel pity, but I mean, certainly his passiveness is pretty comical.
And I think he's a comical character. He's kind of like a Don Quixote or whatever.
Yeah,
and, you know, and it's an epic. It's like it's been compared to the Odyssey, probably by Ari Aster,
and Lord of the Rings by Ari Aster.
Oh, has it now? You know, and it's fun to have that kind of character that you're not too invested in, traipsing along and going on these insane adventures.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
it's a picaresque is the term for it. You know, we're kind of following like a character who and his comical exploits through a series of different settings, each kind of escalating into wilder and wilder territory. Mm-hmm. So I think Don Quixote is probably the perfect that, or like the one that Ari Aster likes to point to is Tristram Shandy, which I've never read, but I've seen the Steve Coogan movie, and it's got some similar qualities. But 3 hours of that can be a bit much.
I feel like there's so many fun surprises in this movie that we might want to just go to the spoiler room sooner rather than later so we can talk about stuff in more detail, because it's hard to go into what happens in this movie without giving too much away, in my opinion.
I agree. I mean, yeah, I think we've even already said the broad setup, but just to like encapsulate it, yeah. So, I think we can say that BEAU does make an earnest effort to get to his mom after things get foiled in increasingly complicated ways. He winds up. While naked, being hit by a truck and taken off to Nathan Lane and Amy Ryan's home to rehabilitate him. He winds up in this kind of like Wes Anderson type community theater thing in the woods. He does eventually make it to his mom's house. And what happens all throughout, though, is impossible to describe without getting into spoilers, I think.
So would you view it, cue it, or screw it, Stephen?
I mean, I'm so conflicted because I saw it in the theater. I paid to rent it the other night. It's a movie I never thought I'd watch twice, but I thought it'd be fun because I know what happens. I know that I can break it up. I know that I can pause and look around and see. And I just found the thing to be, it just feels like a big joke against the audience and A24. And Ari Aster has said so much in interviews that he thought A24 was, I think he actually used the word stupid for greenlighting this movie. And this is one of the rare movies that A24 actually produced. Like, they actually put up the money for it. They don't do that very often. It just feels like this might mean a lot to him, or it might not. But there's not really a lot going on beneath the surface of it, beyond, the visual style and the tension and the comedy. I ultimately did not find it very deep or rewarding to try and dig deeper into on a second viewing. It's 3 hours, that's already, putting some marks against it. I think I gotta give it a screw it. I kind of hate this movie, but there are scenes in it that I'll remember forever and look back on fondly and laugh, or even reference in conversation. But it's a I found it overall both times to be kind of a punishing experience without any reward whatsoever. Chris, would you view, Q, or screw Beau Is Afraid?
I'm very conflicted on this because I it's unlike anything I've ever seen. And I enjoyed so much of it, so much. I hate to have a normie opinion, but that last act just it was not satisfying at all, and it went on forever. And it really kind of made this a movie that's very hard for me to recommend to anybody. But I am glad I watched it, so I'm gonna give it a Q it. Because I just I can't recommend it without caveats, but it was largely a delight, and I think it's really cool that Ari Aster tried this and got to do it and make such a unique and uncompromising movie. And even if everything doesn't work, I think when you do that and you take those big swings, there's plenty of room for error before I start getting pissed off. 50 minutes or so of not having fun does start to piss me off. But I mean, I have no malice towards this movie. So cue it. Patrick.
I'll agree that it's hard to recommend without caveats. The section of this that dragged for me was the theater section in the middle, and we'll talk about that obviously more in the spoiler room. That was one of the ones where it sagged, and it felt like I didn't really know what the hell we were doing exactly. But for the most part, I found this really enjoyable. As Chris said, it's certainly singular. I've never really, I mean, we've described a couple movies that are sort of like it, but there's nothing quite like this. And I enjoyed it a lot as like a weird meditation on anxiety and a weird way to make a movie about anxiety by, again, just following these sort of anxious, intrusive thoughts to their logical or illogical conclusion. I kind of loved it. I don't think I'll ever watch it again, but I'm really glad I saw it, and I will give it a view it.
I mean, look, anytime in 2023, anytime you can make something that feels completely fresh, it's a pretty significant accomplishment, I think.
Yeah, dude.
And something that's completely fresh but doesn't feel like an experiment, really, like Skinamarink. You know, I guess that's new. That I haven't seen anything like that before, but it feels very much like an experimental art film. This doesn't feel like an experimental film. This feels like a very good director doing exactly what he wants to do in a format that makes sense. It's got some problems, in my opinion, but you know, good for them. How often can you say you've seen something that you've never seen before?
Skinamarink is not entertaining. Skinamarink borders on artless. I would say this is entertaining. You can't say it's you can't, even if you hated the movie, you can't tell me that you didn't find at least one entertaining moment in it. You know, let alone I bet you could hate this movie and still say, yeah, this entertained me at like these 10 different points. You know, I understand why it would be a slog for a lot of people, but I think even somebody who like just gets completely lost with this is still gonna be like, yeah, that was pretty fucking funny, or yeah, I'll never forget that.
And it's artful. It's not artless. It's artful.
Absolutely.
You know, even in the slow parts, even in the parts I didn't like, I wasn't that big on the theater section either. But I mean, talk about artistry in that section. You know,
yeah, absolutely
amazing. A lesser film would have the theater sequence and then 20 minutes of bullshit on either side of it, and they'd be like, "That's our movie. That's all the creativity we need to put in a movie."
Yeah, I mean, like, you know, to go back to the quote Steven pulled from Ari, like, I mean, yeah, A24 kind of is stupid by normal industry standards for making this, but that's one of the cool things about A24 is they're just like, you know what, fuck it, we'll give you some money to make your crazy ass 3-hour adventure horror comedy, whatever the fuck, about anxiety that literally, I mean, they're not stupid. Like, they had to know this was not going to be like a blockbuster, but that's one of the cool things about A24, and one of the reasons that we are doing this, I guess, because they actually support artists to do shit like this.
Yeah.
Sure.
And they took a risk. And, I roll my eyes at Ari Aster sometimes, but it would be a tragedy. It would of monumental proportions if this somehow resulted in people not wanting to give Ari Aster money to make movies.
I think it's highly possible, though, because of how much money this lost. I can see A24 being like, yeah, we knew there's a pretty good chance that even though your first two films made us a ton of money and were unconventional, that this one might just not hit the mark. I think they'll probably go back to the well with him. I can't see another studio doing that after this failure, though. I can't see like Universal wanting to make a movie with Ari Aster.
It's so stupid, though, because even in this, he's failing so high above other people's successes.
I agree with you.
Mm-hmm.
And he's demonstrating so much ability. It's like if you watch an NBA game and a guy puts up 40 points, but he's doing it in the wrong basket or something. Maybe that's not the right analogy, but he's doing everything right and showing so much skill and putting on a show. The end result, who cares about the money it made? Jesus. Anyway.
No, I do agree with Steven, though, in the sense that whoever bankrolls him next is going to be like, all right, bro, you got to do one for us this time, like rein it back in a little bit. And I wouldn't frankly be surprised if there was at least some discussion about this before this movie came out, even where they were like, yeah, do your fucking thing. And then, make us a less weird horror movie, something a little more marketable for the next one.
Now they're going to make him do Hereditary 2, Too Scary. And, that sucks.
They're going to replace David Gordon Green with him on The Exorcist 2, 3, whatever the fuck the next one's going to be.
Speaking of which, let me read. I follow a film critic online that I have a love-hate relationship with named A.B. Allen. And I sometimes this person pisses me off. Sometimes I love this person's reviews. But they said in their review of this movie that Ari Aster is one of the few filmmakers operating in horror and horror-adjacent media that doesn't seem intent on making navel-gazing homages to other people's work. His influences are apparent, but his style feels entirely its own thing, and it's exhilarating to have a voice so intent on making its own stamp on its own terms. Aster isn't the new version of any canonized titan of the industry, he's just Ari Aster. And I get the distinct feeling that's going to carry a lot of weight a few decades down the line.
Hey, I mean, it's worth noting that his career is quite young, and he's demonstrated the ability to shoot all manner of insanity. I could even see him making like prestige dramas at one point, deciding like, you know what, I'm done telling dick jokes. I want to use my craft to tell a serious story about. Like, I could see him being a Spielberg like figure at some point if he decides. For his films not to be so challenging on a genre level. I don't, I'm talking like 30 years from now, though.
I don't know. He reminds me of Tarantino in a way where he's like, he's got all this skill, but he's always going to want to go for the dick joke. Doesn't matter if it's now or in 30 years.
Well, there's a big dick joke in this movie, and we're going to talk about it in the spoiler room. Before we go down there, though, check us out on your social media platform of choice. We're on the Twitter, we're on the Instagram, all the shit. We're on Discord. We have a lively discussion going on over there. Many lively discussions going on about all manner of things, not just related to the show, but to horror in general. We have a store. You can buy merch from us, but we'd prefer that you spend that money on this little auction that we're going to be running. Patrick, do you want to throw in another little plug for that before we go down?
Yeah, absolutely. We are going to auction off the rights to pick our next movie, and you can place your bid at everyhorrormovieonnetflix.com/auction. All the proceeds from that auction are going to go to the Entertainment Community Fund, which right now is offering grants to actors, writers, folks in the industry who need it in the midst of this strike situation.
All right. Well, this trip to the spoiler room has been to paraphrase a line from this movie, outrageously postponed. So we'll see you down there in a minute to spoil everything about Beau is Afraid. All right, welcome back to every A24 movie on Blu-ray. We are down here in the spoiler room. We're at the spoiler theater camp. We're going to spoil everything about this movie. I think there's two, I don't know, in my mind, you guys may have other thoughts. There's two big spoilers in this movie. The first one is when we find out that Beau's mom, after he is unable to catch the flight out to visit her, she dies. He gets a call. No. Yeah. He gets a call.
No,
he gets a phone call. He calls. Bill Hader answers the phone of all people.
Playing a UPS delivery man.
Whose face is barely seen in the film.
Yeah, he's facing away from the camera when he does finally show up, and we get like a little like 3/4 turn. He gets a call that he's found this phone next to the body of a woman who has had her head decapitated by a chandelier. No, destroyed.
Exploded by a chandelier.
Nothing exploded. There's nothing left. And there's a hilarious little joke here where Bill Hader says something like is this the number programmed in your phone? Maybe you misdialed. Beau goes to look at his phone, and I did catch this detail the first time and found it even funnier the second time. In his recent calls, movie phone is listed.
Oh yeah.
Which begs the question, like, when is this movie even set? I just think it's so funny and deranged. And it turns out that in fact it is his mom, Mona Wasserman's phone. She has died. Beau has got to get there because another great phone performance in this from Richard Kind.
Yeah.
Who's so fucking good, and I didn't know who it was until he showed up at the end, says that it was his mother's unfortunate wish that she not be buried without her son present, and that every moment that they wait only deepens the humiliation.
Yeah.
So Beau's got to get the fuck out of town.
Just this hilariously confrontational attitude. And Richard Kind is her lawyer, I think, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Just absolutely berating Beau for absolutely no reason.
And that's a Jewish custom too, because like she's got to get in the ground per the Jewish customs. And so it's a grave deal to unnecessarily delay this burial.
That is where my reference was before the spoiler room break, that he says my favorite line in the movie: the burial has been outrageously
yeah.
Oh my god.
And so I mean it's part of the premise that he's trying to make it back for the burial, but the way that information is revealed is so enjoyable that we had to save it for the spoiler room.
Well, yeah, we should note that happens in like the first 20 minutes or something. Like usually spoiler room is third act shit, but today Chris said, no, we can't talk about anything after the first 20 minutes.
Anything after the first 10 minutes, because there's just a surprise a minute in this. And
oh yeah, and before this, or shortly after this, is when we get, oh god, there's so much. The reason Beau can't make it on the flight is because I think he forgets something in his apartment, or he has to run across the hall, and he left the keys in the door. He comes back, the apartment door is closed, the keys are gone.
His luggage is gone.
Yeah,
it's one of those. It's just another one of those anxiety things. Like, you know, how many times have you set something down and run across the room? Like, hell, when my power went out, I was working at the library and I went to, you know, the bathroom or the drinking fountain, and I left my computer unattended, and it was like still in eyesight. And I was like, I'm only going to be gone 20 seconds.
Dude, literally every time that I accidentally leave my keys in the door, or somebody leaves the keys in the door, when I have that realization that they've just been sitting in there sometimes overnight, anxiety brain just goes blah, 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 like 17 different things that could have happened that didn't. Of course, it was fine, but all the things that could have happened by just leaving the keys in the door, because everybody is out to steal my keys from my door, you know?
And in this movie, it's all true. And not only are they going to steal your keys, but they're going to get into your apartment while you're running to the store for a bottle of water. And the most comical like the worst party you could ever imagine happening when you're out of the house is gonna happen.
The worst people. And on top of it all, there's a brown recluse spider in the building while this is happening. And we know we get a POV shot from like the floor inside of his apartment showing the spider like skittering across. So we know that that's going to pay off at some point too. I have two quick things to say about this. One, this movie is based on or inspired by a short that Ari Aster made when he was at I think it was when he was at the AFI, called BEAU. And it starred the lead actor from his short film that I love, The Strange Thing About the Johnsons. And the short film is a guy leaves his keys in the door of his apartment, and then they disappear, and it's a series of escalating events. I can't find it online right now, so I don't know how closely it mirrors the sequence of events in that portion of this movie. But I'd love to see it and see what like an early draft for this kind of horror comedy looked like. And I know someone who's basically done this. I have a neighbor who left the keys to their apartment and both of their cars in their car in the ignition and had both cars stolen a few months ago.
Wow.
Which would be my nightmare.
Yep.
Right? They clearly haven't learned their lesson, because the other day I woke up and went out to get the mail, and they had left the back door of their car open all night.
Wow.
So there might be a whole kind of BEAU situation going on across from me.
Yeah.
So on a second viewing, some of that felt a little more like tangible and relatable.
Yeah, just all this stuff that happens in his neighborhood is just great. I mean, we touched on it already. I don't want to harp on it too much more, but just the portrayal of everything being scary, loud, aggressive, like literally his walls are shaking. I love that effect of just the walls shaking so hard from the noise outside. And then someone's pissed at him, slips a note under his door, which is another great anxiety manifestation thing. Like, again, this is me. Like, I'm like so sensitive to any noise around me, especially when I'm trying to sleep.
Same.
And then like the fear that my neighbor actually hates me for some unspecified reason while I'm, being oversensitive to everything around me. It was just, I just saw myself in this in like a really humorous way. I was able to go, wow, this really is, it helped me do that like reductio ad absurdum of my own thoughts,
I love that stuff because I relate so hard too. I'm super sensitive to noise. I sleep with headphones on and white noise, even though I live in a quiet neighborhood, just from years of living in really chaotic places. And I love that, like the even like the notes themselves kind of are animated and escalate in a way. Like at one point, one of them slides from under the door all the way up to him very dramatically. Oh, it's so brilliant.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Something I thought was interesting was that this whole opening section, but where BEAU lives, like when you think of an epic, like you think of the Odyssey or whatever, usually it's like, oh, the hero's going from his shire, his tranquil place, into a world of danger. Here, BEAU starts out in a world of danger with the worst vibes of any place he travels to, and sort of progressively travels to more tranquil places. And I thought that was kind of an interesting inversion, and I'm not sure what, if anything, it means or if it's intentional.
Places that are more tranquil, like sort of on the face of them, but then still horrible shit happens to him there.
At least, horrible shit happens to him everywhere.
Yeah.
So, that's a level playing field. but just nowhere he goes has as much open hostility, bad vibes, and apparent danger as where he starts off.
That is a funny subversion. I mentioned before, Ari Aster has called this a Jewish Lord of the Rings in the press, and I thought like, okay, is it really? But that very well could have been an inspiration now that you lay it out that way.
Yeah.
This is something I thought, and this might be a complete stretch, but again, like we're at a disadvantage. I just watched this movie yesterday, and I feel like I need to kick it around my head for a month before I'm qualified to have any takes on it. But here we are doing this show, talking like we know some shit. I have a cousin who's very religious. He's essentially a pastor. He's not really a pastor, but essentially. And I remember a long time ago, the question came up of like literal hell like, is hell literal? And he was like, no, there's no literal hell. Hell is being removed from the love of God who loves you. And watching this, I thought of that because I'm like, this man BEAU is living in hell. And I think not only is it hellish circumstances, but like it looks like hell on some occasions. He's got these like long red lit windowless corridors in his apartment building and stuff. And it's like, maybe that's something going on here, because the big conflict of this movie is him being removed from the love of his mother, or not knowing how to reconcile the love of his mother, or just not having love in his life in a reliable way. And kind of searching for it. So I don't know.
Well, and there's a reason for that. So maybe we should get into a little bit about what we know about BEAU and his upbringing and his ancestry. His father allegedly died while conceiving him. Literally, the orgasm killed him. He had a heart murmur. BEAU has the same condition. In flashbacks, we find out that his mother has forbidden him, or warned him, not to have sex. He cannot have sex because if he does, he will die like his father. There are a lot of flashbacks to this idyllic vacation at a resort where he strikes up a little meet cute with a young girl about his
cruise,
age.
actually.
A cruise, yeah, okay. And she's kind of abruptly taken away and asks him to wait for her. You know, they're probably like 10, 11 years old. And he has literally waited for her until his, late 40s, early 50s, however old his character is supposed to be.
Oh, this makes a lot more sense now, because I thought she meant like wait for her like at a port or something, but no.
No,
she means don't
like
have sex ever.
Yeah, or at least that's how he interprets it,
yeah.
and that does come to bear in the end.
That makes some things make more sense.
Which adds layers to his mother's kind of controlling hold on him, which we should also say she is played not in flashback, but her voice, I think it's her voice throughout, and then in the flesh, at the end of the film, by Patti LuPone, who is just fucking terrifying. She's so... The second I first heard her voice, I immediately distrusted her calling him sweetie and trying to be motherly and like feigning surprise that he might be anxious about coming to visit, or that he might be lying that he's coming to visit, and like just the way that she uses the script and her voice to kind of like wrap tendrils around him and ratchet up his anxiety is so compelling to watch and listen to.
So yeah, he moves on from the city to the home of Nathan Lane and the actress I'm not really familiar with, but you mentioned
Amy Ryan, dude. Amy Ryan rules.
Oh my god, she's so good in this.
Yeah, and in general.
And they're like ostensibly nursing him back to health after he's been hit by a truck.
Their truck. Well, Amy Ryan hit him. Let's just say briefly, at one point, BEAU winds up in the street naked because he's taken a bath. And he looks up, and not all the party guests have left the apartment after he thought it's been cleared out, after it's been ransacked. There's a man like 10 feet up, like toward the ceiling, holding onto the walls and about to slip and fall on him in the bathtub. And then the brown recluse crawls onto his face and bites him. He falls. BEAU runs into the street naked and is stabbed by a naked stabber who has been in the news and who's running around. And shortly after that, he gets comically hit by this big, like, delivery truck.
We should also mention the relevant detail that we get to see for the first time, his enormous testicles in this bath scene,
balls.
Which is also a plot point, that he has epididymitis, which is a swelling of the testicles, which, I mean, TMI, but I can't not reveal that this is also a point on which I relate to this movie because I've had this condition.
Oh, God.
Not to the extent that BEAU does, but like I've been diagnosed with this condition. It's not super fun. But it was just, there were so many fucking weird things in this where I was like, did they make this movie about me?
Damn.
I think you and Ari need to have lunch.
I think we do, dude. My twin flame.
Wow. I love when he wakes up in the bedroom and we get to see, like, he wakes up in their teenage daughter's bedroom and she's a piece of work.
Hilarious
little
performance.
as Nathan Lane
All
calls
that
her.
was amazing.
The
Yeah.
set design is amazing. She's got all these fake like K-pop boy band posters. Like Gotta Wanna is one of the band names that stood out to me.
Oh, are they all fake? I was looking at those, like trying
Yeah.
to pick out like an artist that I might know, and I was not. I didn't realize they were all fake. That's great.
No, they're all like bad Photoshop.
There's one that's like Kiss, but it's like KI55, and then it's like
Yeah.
55 boys want a kiss or something.
Yeah. There's a lot of number play with the band names and stuff. It's so funny.
She's another person who is just like a comically outsized asshole to Beau. Like, there's no reason for her to be as rude to him as she is. It's along the lines of Richard Kind.
This is my favorite section of the movie.
It's my second favorite. I love the first time I saw this. Especially when she gets him high.
Yeah.
And like insists.
Oh my god.
And oh my god, that line where he's like, what is this? And she said, it's three things. But like teenagers are fucking terrified.
You did that to me once, Steven. You did that to me once.
I did. And I sent you straight to the Phantom Zone.
The experience he had is the experience I had.
I literally wrote down, what's in it? It's three things. Phantom Zone! ! In my notes.
Yes. I went straight to the Phantom Zone.
Like Zoomers are fucking scary to me. You know, like do you know that feeling of just like how like a younger generation, if you think about it too hard and you're not actually interacting with them, they can seem so like intimidating and like petulant. Like
they're here to replace us.
That's this movie's stance on Zoomers, and I think it's awesome because it turns the experience of having to try to like behave around and relate to this young girl into horror.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh,
Like
it's
she's
so
as
good.
awful as she could possibly be, and then some.
And they're like her and her friend, they're always on their phones. They're always filming him with their phones, and we never know why or what they're gonna do with it.
Well, for potential blackmail, because they're always saying like, we're going to tell people that you like grabbed us by the hair and assaulted us.
Yeah, but
whatever.
there's more to it than that. Like, yeah, that's the obvious threat, but they're just like always filming him. You're like, why? Stop.
Yeah, that stuff is so good.
The entire family is like hilariously bad vibes. I mean, Amy Ryan and Nathan Lane seem cheery at first, but almost certainly ominously cheery from the start. They have a son who died, right?
Oh God,
Died
in the military,
that was so
in
good,
Caracas.
too.
Yeah.
They've got a shrine set up for him.
And they have like a shrine. It's like the shrine is like in the dining room, and there's a plaque that says something like "Never goodbye, always see you later."
Yeah.
Like
Yeah, it's just like a standard like piece of word art that they put up to memorialize their son.
Nathan Lane is like a renowned surgeon, at least we're led to believe. And he and Amy Ryan and the daughter are popping pills left and right, too. They take their pills with dinner. So, you know, to varying effects, it seems to make the daughter even more of an asshole, and it kind of chills them out so they can tolerate each other.
Yeah.
And then they have a military vet who served with their son who's living on the property. In
Jeeves. His name is Jeeves.
Yes. Who is prone to just like the most extreme psychotic panic attacks / anger attacks possible at any given moment.
Yeah.
And who just clearly wants to kill Beau as soon as he arrives, and everyone's like, "Oh no, he loves you."
He's like a human attack dog. I don't think he says a single word. He's just like the crazy dog who's waiting for its owner to like let it off the leash, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
And he gets visualized as like an attack or like a scary dog during the animated sequence too.
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
I think that's supposed to refer to him, and that creeped me the hell out too.
Mhm. But yeah, this all bottoms out because the family has been maintaining their dead son's bedroom. This it's so funny even describing this because it's like this shouldn't even be funny. Like this is some fucked up shit that like real people go through, but there's still just something about the tone of it and the absurdity, the degree to which this is all heightened, that it's just like, yes, this is absolutely hilarious. Like they've been keeping the dead son's bedroom. The daughter is pissed about it because she thinks they should just be putting Beau there, but she very passive aggressively tells them like, yeah, sure, like stay in my room. And she ends up trying to like basically vandalize the dead brother's room with a couple of cans of paint, like starts painting Beau's name on the wall. And then she asks Beau to drink paint with her, which he refuses. And she like guzzles paint. And there's this, I mean, again, talk about horror. All of a sudden we pivot into horror because Amy Ryan is like trying to give CPR to like this dead girl. And she's got blue paint all over her mouth and the squelching noises. I'll never forget as she's trying to give the kid CPR when she's already dead. And it's, again, like such a, I mean, I actually am experiencing chills just thinking about this moment because it's such a bizarre, singular hybrid of horror and comedy, which are two things that we often are like, fuck, another horror comedy, but like, great moment. It is horrifying and it's also bizarrely funny at the same time.
Self-harm has never been so hilarious.
Yes.
But like both times I've seen that scene, I've been conflicted in that same way of like, I can handle an edgy sense of humor and I have a very dark sense of humor myself. But both times I thought like, I cannot believe I'm laughing right now.
Yeah.
I need to go like shot by shot through that sequence to figure out how he got me just rolling with laughter during something that is objectively like sad and terrifying.
It's just my cup of tea. And like, I don't know. I feel like the issue with horror comedies is like, they pull their punch on the scary thing to give you a funny thing. And this is like, no, we're just going to make the situation so comic, but then we're going to shoot the actual horror.
Right. Well, and I think, again, like the Rosetta Stone to all this is that it's about anxiety. Like you've seen enough of this at this point to get that this is probably some weird, like subjective experience Beau's having. Like this probably isn't all happening for real. Like much of it couldn't happen for real. Yeah, I don't know. I've said this too many times already, but it's that reducing the anxiety to absurdity that makes it both feel very real, very visceral, but also laughable. It's unique. I've never seen anything that like tone wise like this.
Well, and there's a meta level to it as well that we can probably have some fun discussing, which is like, okay, how much of this is Beau's subjective, warped perception of what's going on, and how much of it is potentially, or has been potentially, manufactured for him by his mother?
I think it's all real. I don't think it follows logic, but I think it's all real. I think it's just it's all a manifestation. There's no distinction between his subjective experience and the objective reality of this movie.
Well, but his fear and anxiety themselves, I think, are manufactured by his mother.
Well, oh yeah, of course.
The way he perceives the world is a result of her influence.
I'm just trying to say, I don't think it's a matter of like, oh, what's really happening in the world of this movie and what's in his anxiety. It's just it's one reality. And it's anxiety.
Yeah.
What matters is how he experiences it. What might be interesting to parse out. Well, I thought it would be, but it didn't really lead me anywhere in the second viewing. Is like there may very well actually be a conspiracy here that his mother has laid out for him. That these people really are employees of hers, and that she has this has all been sort of a punishment for him along the way. That she's designed in some ways. I
disagree.
Oh,
you disagree? Well, I'm not saying that that's true, but it's hinted that it might be.
Yeah, that comes up, but when that came up, I was like, are they pulling is this the game situation right now?
It's not. I think it's like we as the audience get the best of both worlds. And that even if that isn't true, it doesn't matter because Beau experiences what he experiences in the way that he believes he does. Mm-hmm. And whether or not his mom was like planting him in all of these situations, who can say for sure? But he seems to believe in the end that was the case too.
Well, and it's so surreal. There's so much here that like very literally, like physically, realistically could not happen. Mm-hmm. That no one could actually engineer.
Well, that's the end of him at the house, and then we go from that the high of that.
Amy Ryan orders Jeeves to quote rip him apart, and so he flees,
right.
Which is hilarious.
He has a monitor on his ankle too, so they can track him, and essentially it can probably be detonated at some point.
I loved that line reading. Jeeves, rip him apart. So good. But yeah, then when you get to the theater.
And yeah, and it's like it's almost like a Renaissance fair, but not really. It's like kind of like a commune, but not really. These traveling artists and performers who just put on Shakespeare in the park in the middle of the woods, to an audience apparently of them of their own. They do say that like, oh, we stop in towns and we sell things and stuff, but it looks like everybody there is part of the community.
Well, they say we like to blur the lines between audience and theater goers, which was also hilarious to me, again, coming from somebody who works in entertainment industry. Like, I fucking hate any theater that does that. Like, no, don't blur the lines. I don't want to be part of this. Like, give me theater. Don't make me part of it.
Damn. He meets a kind, young, pregnant lady who he seems to project a lot of affection onto.
He's given a costume to participate, and that was also a hilarious bit to me where the guy holds up, like, the costumer holds up two outfits that are both, like, essentially the same shade of, like, off-white, and he's like, oh, I think this one would go really well with your eyes, but this one's he's like, it's so funny, like, there's no color, there's nothing notable about these outfits.
And then we just have a very surreal sequence in which Beau's watching the stage play and imagines himself as the hero of the stage play.
Yeah.
Imagines a whole life story for himself, which may or may not be actually happening, in which he becomes a farmer and falls in love and has 3 sons and gets washed away by a storm.
I love this shit because I had the same feeling the first time I saw it, but the second time it was even funnier to me. It's like falsely profound in a way that I found some like poetry and theater to be, to the degree that now, like, I'm seeing this now, like, post the big conversation we're having about AI, and it feels like this entire play was written by a chatbot. It's so ridiculously, everything is like, oh, it sounds poetic, but if you were to read it on the page, it would just be bullshit. And it's like completely nonsensical and like intuitive. But on the same level, it's kind of beautiful because Beau, I think he kind of discovers art and discovers like, oh, like he discovers like storytelling and like stepping outside of yourself and outside of the chaos of your daily life and like learning to see yourself reflected in art or maybe even creating art. It's like this wonderful little respite for him that's also surreal and unnerving because he seems to like get so immersed in it that he truly believes he had 3 beautiful boys, which I think is the name of the play. It's a trip, man.
I struggled to understand the significance of this. I said before I got bogged down in it, but honestly, with that reading, Stephen, I kind of want to go back and revisit it because, I think I bought into, weirdly, the profound tone. It doesn't feel funny. It doesn't like nod quite as much as really any other segment in the thing. It feels, there's a sense of like profundity to it. And I wasn't really getting what I was supposed to take away from it, especially because it goes on for quite a while. But no, I think that read makes sense and fits more with the tone of the film.
It's definitely jarring and it does drag no matter how you read it. But I found with that reading the second time through, it was a lot more entertaining and seemed to go by a little faster. And of course, it's beautiful and there's lots of cool practical set stuff that reminded me of like Baron Munchausen or something. And there's lots of cool, like squiggly hand-drawn animation.
Beautiful, yeah.
Going on. But I think this is like him kind of making fun of like Focus Features movies in a way. Just kind of like the bland, like faux indie, faux profound stuff. But Beau's life has been so sheltered and so like riddled with like the daily anxieties of living in hell that it's profound for him. And he really maybe latches onto it a little too hard.
Right. Well,
that, there's this life, like this fantasy of a life that I might have that I can escape to and not have to think about my mom. Like, I'm a father now and I have children.
Yeah, and it fits into the anxiety narrative well too, because he feels safe in this community. I think maybe for the first time in the movie, there's a feeling of some kind of safety and security. People are warm to him.
Mhm.
They encourage him to be part of this thing, and he either imagines or kind of his magical realism into this story and seems to be really caught up in it, including this sort of like beautiful and somewhat tragic ending where like he's finally reunited with his like sons after a whole lot of hardships. And then like realizes that he couldn't possibly have fathered the sons because again, he's not able to have sex because he might die from having sex. And then it all kind of falls apart at that point. So it does kind of work on the anxiety level again, in the sense of that even the like fantasy world that he's been encouraged to indulge in, where like he lives a normal life and has a family and has this sort of idyllic existence and is then reunited with his sons after a bad thing happens, is still punctured by this fear of having sex, and suddenly he gets brought back to earth by this ridiculous anxiety that he has.
It is kind of funny. It does kind of achieve the comic beats of the earlier segments too, in the sense that like, yeah, that fantasy gets punctured like not only by that realization, but like Jeeves shows up.
Yeah.
It just blows everything to hell.
It's
and
so
one of the
funny.
biggest laughs for me is when the guy in the butterfly costume grabs the gun out of that weird little like swirling painted thing. I don't even know what that was, if it's a speaker or whatever. And you realize that like, oh, like he might think this has been a safe space all along, but like these people are into some shady shit.
Yeah. Even this like idyllic theater community is still prepared for violence, for war, essentially.
Yeah.
He also, I don't know if it's important or not, but he also meets a man who claims to know his father and that his father's alive.
Oh,
right
yeah.
before all the violence breaks out.
Yeah.
Yes. He gets exploded in a pretty hilarious and surprising fashion.
Jeeves kills himself by falling on his own machine gun, which just continues.
Does he kill himself?
Well, I mean,
Does
not
he?
in the
'Cause he
sense of
shows up
like
again.
suicide. Well, yeah, true, but appears to be killed by falling on his own machine gun, which continues to fire into his like chest/shoulder as he lies on the ground.
And then he presses the incapacitate button on his phone for Beau's monitor, which just gives him an electric jolt and then like fizzles out in a cloud of smoke instead of exploding.
Honestly, I'm loving this movie so much more as I'm like talking about / reliving it. And I already liked it.
It's kind of maybe my biggest complaint. I don't know if it's a complaint about this movie, but it's a reason that I don't think I'll ever revisit it again. Is it has the feeling of somebody telling you about their dream. And he does it very, very well. But like we don't generally get very much from hearing people describe their weird dreams. It's more interesting for the teller than the audience.
So I disagree with that. I think you've said that before. I think that's more a matter of personal taste. I actually like hearing about people's dreams. They're pretty. It's if it's an interesting dream, at least, you know, and I at least usually the ones people share with me do tend to be interesting. But I like hearing about dreams.
I usually don't like hearing about dreams, but the reason I don't like hearing about dreams is because they're very arbitrary, and in this, like, it's a film, it's not arbitrary. Somebody made these decisions and shot these things for a reason, although I mean the payoff isn't quite there, so it does feel arbitrary in that sense, because you get to the end and you're like, well, what the hell, what was that all supposed to mean? I saw a review I liked, I think on Letterboxd, that said something like, you either plan to skydive and you have a parachute, or you just jump out of a plane, and 99% of the experience is the same. And they said that BEAU is Afraid is basically just jumping out without a parachute. And
I like that.
And it feels like something profound and like it's going to pay off with something, and then it just hits the ground.
I actually love the ending, but we're about to get to that, I think.
All right. Until that point, it seems like it's indistinguishable from a perfect film. Yeah. So then I think he ends up at Mom's house.
And the funeral's already over.
Not quite in time to make the funeral, but she's lying in state, headless.
Which I
is really
cackle
funny.
at, yeah.
And it's just, I don't know how, but like if you screen grab that, you know it's an Ari Aster movie. There's something just so, it's staged, but like not in a Wes Anderson kind of way where everything is like symmetrical and sanitized, and yet it still is just like blurring the lines between, it's a simple image, but it blurs the lines between reality and surreality in such a fucking hilarious and creepy way.
Well, and also, what is it with this man in beheadings? He loves a fucking beheading.
Well, he loves. I think he would probably like to behead his own mother. Like, let's not even joke about. Let's not joke around. Like, he says he has a fine relationship with her, but I doubt it. If you look at the 3 films he's put out so far.
Well, and look, that is the other level on which this really hit me, and I'm not going to get deep into it, but I've had an intense conflict with my parents, particularly my mother, this summer, and this hit hard on that level as well.
Yeah, so I mean, let's get into it because we find out. All right, I guess we got to talk about how Elaine, his tween crush, shows up again. She's now an adult woman about his age,
played by Parker Posey, my queen. I was so excited to see her. I hadn't seen her in so long.
I have to interject really briefly. Parker Posey, I knew she was in this movie. She did some interviews for it. A huge part of this movie, and may have colored my first viewing, was waiting to find out how Parker Posey was going to show up and what she was going to do, and goddamn did she deliver.
Yes.
Yeah, she shows up, and this is kind of the part where the movie starts to lose me because it's one of those, like, feels very unearned romances, but whatever. They have sex, and it doesn't kill Joaquin Phoenix, and so the weight of the world is off his shoulders. There's just one problem, which is that it kills Parker Posey for some reason.
Which I knew was coming. Like, the whole time he's, like, monologuing to her about, oh my god, I thought I was going to die, and he's not making eye contact. She's not moving, not responding. I'm like, oh, she's absolutely dead. Like, I knew that for a long time before they actually cut to that reaction shot, but the reaction shot was so fucking worth it. Like, just her frozen with bloodshot eyes, still naked on top of him was
the
amazing.
Frozen rictus of orgasm and horror is so good. And the first time I saw this, I thought it was so funny when she gets carried away. And they actually I was like, how did they do that? Well, it's so simple, but they did it so well. They just made a full body cast of her.
Yeah, because she's already stiff, but, like, still has her hands down by her crotch. It's just unforgettable imagery.
But no,
turns out Mom
dead.
saw the whole thing.
Yeah, Mom's not dead. Mom's in hanging out in the bathroom, watching the sex, watching everything, and comes out and an hour of mom drama ensues.
Is it that long? No,
it's not quite that long.
No, not at that point.
I still have it on my thing. I can clock it here. But it's long, and
it's a whole chapter of the movie.
It's a long monologue, and she destroys. Patti LuPone is fucking terrifying and so good.
It's hard for me to break it down. It's hard for me to really say what it amounts to. But yeah, I mean, this movie is fundamentally about something to do with your relationship with your mother.
Oh my God, I forgot. The second funniest line in the movie for me is when Joaquin finally comes. And Parker Posey hasn't yet. And she's like, oh my God, I felt that. You just blasted through that bag.
I died. That was so good.
Oh my God. Yeah, I was frozen in that moment.
All right, so it's about 35 minutes from the end.
It was also funny and terrifying to me that, like, as she was touching herself to get herself to come, she just keeps saying, "Don't move, don't move, don't move," which was, like, such a terrifying but also funny thing to say. Yeah.
While they're listening to fucking Mariah Carey.
Oh, yes, when she starts over on her phone partway through having sex because, like, it's the moment was ruined, but she needs to start "Always Be My Baby" over again.
And Mom goes on a long monologue throughout the house about how he's always been a terrible son. He's never been able to she's given him so much love. He's never able to return it, even close to the amount that she deserves. She bought him the same Bette Midler CD for Christmas twice. He pretended to get lost. He does all the she's got video footage of all the things that, like, normal teenagers do that, like, upset her. Like, he pretends to hide at the mall, and she, like, falls and hurts her ankle. He has his friends over, and they pressure him into going through her underwear, and they take some, like, it's just like she goes through, basically just, like, reads him the riot act about everything he's ever done. mostly in his childhood, that has, rubbed her the wrong way, that she's undeserving of.
And she's been colluding with his therapist to get
Yes.
dirt on him and subtly destabilize him. And of course, faked her death. Like, we haven't mentioned that. She faked her death to get him out there or destabilize him further. I don't know.
Yeah, and all the therapy sessions have been recorded, and she's got her favorite session that they play back, and he's trying to explain, like, this is what I was really trying to say, and, he's basically left without any kind of defense.
Yeah.
For the rest of the movie.
I mean, yeah, and all this is just, it's well acted, but I wasn't picking up what it was putting down. I didn't understand what any of it meant. It was just kind of melodrama for its own sake for me, and didn't give me a lot of insight into what this movie is about, if anything. What's this movie about?
Yeah, I already gave my grand unifying theory of it before the spoiler room, so I won't repeat myself.
I'm not understating this. I have literally watched, at this point, hours of Ari Aster talking about this movie in interviews and at festival Q&As. And what's frustrating but also kind of funny is that he generally refuses to answer most questions and says, I don't know how to answer that. And then eventually he's quoted as saying, stop trying to figure it out. It's dumb. Like, I don't think there's anything to this that isn't personal to him, but also I think it's like the ultimate edgelord movie. He's just trying to make a funny, fucked up movie where fucked up things happen and see how far you'll go along with it. And there may be some kernels of truth about, like, mother-son relationships in it, but I think it is, like, very surface level. I think this is a movie that is trying to get you to feel as deeply as possible guilt and anxiety. Just in a cinematic sense. I think it is just like almost a tone poem about anxiety and guilt. And it works for most of the movie on that level.
Yeah, I would give him a little more credit. I feel like maybe he doesn't have intentions to, have this be about something, but he's deliberately putting a bunch of shit on paper and then on film, and hoping as part of a therapeutic process that a truth emerges from it. And once you look at it, you can find something that's personal, not only to him, but to you, maybe. I don't know.
I mean, it's funny, Chris, because normally we're kind of split two ways, where I'm on your side in that there are themes here and there are ideas, and maybe they weren't properly expressed or fully developed, but there was an intention. And I mean, maybe he's just being a troll, but he's been on record many, many times saying, yeah, there's not really an intention here. This is just a ride. This is just a feel bad movie. Don't think too hard about it.
Well, then that's frustrating.
But if he's telling the truth, it's even more frustrating. If he's just trolling, I don't really know what motivation he would have to do that. I mean, ostensibly you do Q&As and you do the press circuit to try and sell your movie.
I mean, if
didn't really do that.
If he's trolling around, then it's a fuck around and find out situation when people don't give him any more money to make movies because he made a 3-hour movie that was deliberately dumb, in his words.
I think it was. I mean, it seems like he was very influenced by, weirdly, like Paul Thomas Anderson.
Oh God! I said the first thing I said. I watched this with my sister, and she and I have watched some Paul Thomas Anderson movies before, and this movie reminded me a lot of Punch Drunk Love. Actually,
yes, 100%.
But as soon as the credits came on, I said, "I'm never talking shit about Paul Thomas Anderson again." So
there is a very heavy Punch Drunk Love, and like Paul Thomas Anderson is like bafflingly on record as saying that like he loves Billy Madison and Happy Gilmore. They're like perfect comedies, and I would wager that Ari Aster is as big of a fan of that kind of broad comedy, but also the way that Anderson filtered that through anxiety for Punch Drunk Love. But it all feels like more surface level and like stylistic than anything truly deep.
I don't think it's dumb. I think that's him being flippant. But I don't think there's necessarily much more to it than, again, just kind of taking the assignment of how deep can you go with intrusive thoughts? And surely getting to your mother's funeral, not only late wounded, bedraggled, pursued by a million antagonists, whatever, but also getting there and finding out that the entire funeral was a ruse, her death was faked, exclusively to fuck with you. There's the good version of you in her attic, along with your father, which is a gigantic anthropomorphic penis. Like, I mean, again, I just think it's continuing the same assignment that he's followed for the entire movie, which is how much deeper can we go with this guy's comical levels of fear and paranoia. And it delivers intensely on that level for me.
Well, if it delivers, then it's deep enough, right? But for a 3-hour movie, it's like, oh my God, I can't believe we're getting... And I enjoyed that part of the movie. I thought it was surprising and strange, but like, it's literally just a dick joke. It's literally just like, I think the mom is just saying, all right, well, I've been trying to hold this from you forever, but your dad was a dick. And it turns out he was literally just a giant penis. Like, that is some Adam Sandler shit. But I admire him for being like, you know what? We're doing it, guys. We're doing it, and we're going to build a practical 15-foot effect. It is gruesome when Jeeves shows up, like, unharmed from falling on his gun earlier and starts stabbing at the balls, and cum is coming out of them and blood. Like, I admire it, but like at that point, you're really testing my patience. Like, I want something a little more profound to cling to.
Yeah, I don't know. It's hard, and yeah, I think he's probably being flippant when he says it's not about anything. It's just dumb. And this is the same guy who says Midsummer is a comedy.
Yeah, dude. I didn't want to bring that up,
so.
But I also thought it. Yes, 100%.
Yeah.
Well, he's 100% a troll, but that alone gives me pause because, like, I don't expect directors to explain their work, and I prefer creators who have funny and interesting ways to subvert those types of questions. But that's literally all he's ever done, and this movie made me think, like, maybe the well has run dry, and this is as long as he can play the charade. I don't want him to stop being his wild ass, cruel self with his films, but I want him to grow up a little bit, just a little tiny bit, you know.
Well, if we see him at Motor City Nightmares, we can ask him about it.
Yeah, I'm sure he'll give us a more honest and sincere answer.
Yeah.
God, I don't know. He seems like I wouldn't want to be in a room with
that
this
was
guy.
That was my joke. I was
Yeah,
not being honest or sincere myself with that comment.
So, I mean, the kind of the climax of this whole thing with Mom is he kind of stands up for himself and loses the murmuring and damn near strangles her to death. Does strangle her to death, as far as the scene's concerned, because he stops, but then she kind of keels over and smashes through a aquarium or a terrarium or something anyway.
Well, and it's clear he already like
hilarious...
pretty seriously damaged her windpipe. You see a horrifying image of her like the windpipe being completely like dislocated.
Mm-hmm.
Then we get the hilarious shot of him with that rictus of like horror on his face as he walks across the yard toward the boat. He gets in a boat.
Travels across the ocean like the Truman Show. Goes into a cave, emerges in a giant, it's like the Colosseum when they used to flood it with water and have naval battles in it.
Yeah,
he's in this giant arena. And
he's being put on trial by Richard Kind, who has only been heard in voice form thus far.
He's being put on trial. And so now I'm like, okay, I get it. It's you guys have declined my repeated invitations to come over and have 5 beers and listen to Pink Floyd The Wall on the Sonos. But if you did, you would understand this scene, because I get it. I'm like, all right, it's the trial. It's
Kafka.
It's the whole movie has been his anxieties and stuff, and now his ultimate anxiety is he's being put on trial for his antisocial attitude towards his mother. And I guess, I spent a lot of this movie thinking, BEAU is afraid. What is BEAU afraid of? Do you guys have an opinion on what BEAU is afraid of? Or you think I guess, Patrick, you would say it's just a general thing.
Yeah, man.
Everything.
I think everything.
I feel like the central problem of the movie is BEAU wants permission to either break free of his mother or to hate his mother. He's afraid of not loving his mother enough in the way he's supposed to, I think.
Well, and that comes up in the trial because she says something like, basically, like, he always has the worst impulses, at least as far as she's concerned, but he always takes the most passive way toward achieving the outcome that he wants.
Mm-hmm.
And he's done that throughout his entire life, according to her. And then
And there's no defense. His defense is a 1-800 call lawyer guy who's like meekly muttering from the other side of the arena.
Yeah, like his it's such great like nightmare shit. Like Richard Kind's voice is just booming across this arena. The audience is just in Richard Kind's like eating out of his hand. And BEAU's defense, I don't think you can even see his like defense lawyer. And there's a sign over him that says defense, and then underneath 1-800 defense, but spelled DEFENCE. And I don't know why, but that was very funny to me too. And you can barely hear him. You can barely hear the defense lawyer.
And then, I mean, the question is BEAU ever going to reconcile this? Is he ever going to become a man? Is he ever going to stand up? Is he ever going to be able to free himself of his mother? No, his boat capsizes and he drowns.
Well, first his feet are stuck to the boat. He's trying to literally stand up for himself in the boat, and then he can't move. His feet are stuck to the boat, and then I think essentially he falls over and is stuck to the boat and has no way of righting it because he's stuck to the boat, and so he drowns as the credits roll.
Well, the boat like comically capsizes.
It does.
Like there's like an explosion
Cartoonish,
almost, and then it's over, and it's like, oh, okay, really? That's what we spent 3 hours.
And I thought it was a fake ending.
I did too.
Which
I
was, because I remember it was in my back of my brain. Everything Everywhere All at Once has a fake ending, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I heard that. I haven't seen that movie yet, but I like knew that there was some movie that came out that had fake credits or something, and I was like, oh, this has to be the movie with fake credits, because this is just such an abrupt and unsatisfying ending to this thing. But that's the ending.
No,
it's real.
I loved it. I actually kind of thought it was perfect, and it was very satisfying to me, because again, it's like, all right, you've gone through all this, and again, it's the question: how much further can we take this? Put you on trial, nightmare trial. Everyone hates you. Your defense lawyer is worthless. The entire crowd is like, you suck, you lose, and also you can't get out of this boat, and now you drown. Like it's just the perfect nightmare that just keeps descending into further and further levels of hell to me.
That makes sense, and I like your read on all that. I was looking for something bigger, but I'm probably the fool.
I think I was a fool too, but I mean, like, I can't think of a better way to wrap this up given what happens for those 3 hours leading up to it. I didn't find it satisfying, but like, is it really supposed to be all that satisfying?
Yeah, at that point,
you're not expecting this character to grow at any point.
No, there's a moment where he's strangling his mom where you're like, okay, maybe something's changing here, but then he immediately starts backpedaling on it, and it becomes clear that this is never going to go away.
Yeah.
So his life is forfeit.
Yeah.
Damn.
Guys, can I tell you one? I feel like we're almost at the end of our own nightmare journey here, but can I tell you one more thing?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, of course.
I also have a heart murmur.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
This one was a little freaky. Even though it was weirdly therapeutic for me in some ways, I think it's also going to give me some fresh anxieties that I'm really not looking forward to. So fucking thanks, Ari.
That's fascinating. Wow.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Steven, did you notice on your rewatch that like one of the first things you see is like a mother chasing her kid away who's playing with a boat in the fountain, and then the boat capsizes?
Oh.
Actually, I didn't.
Yeah. It's like the second thing you see once he leaves the therapist's office.
Wow.
Well, you see a lot of things when he leaves the therapist's office too. It's
You do.
hard to focus on what's happening. There's like oh my God, there's another scene where I was like, I can't believe I'm laughing at this, where like he encounters a crowd of people that are filming a guy that's about to kill himself, and they're all like egging him.
Yeah.
Oh, that's hilarious. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. It is something that I think warrants a second viewing to just catch little Easter eggs and things like that and moments like that. But
it's hard for me to imagine rewatching this within the next 5 years. I could see myself revisiting it after a while on a like lazy Sunday afternoon when I have like the like perfect person to show it to, because I feel like there's a specific type of person who's going to be geared to like really vibe with this. So I could see myself revisiting it.
It's just once I start getting sweaty in my chair, like I need a better paced movie to finish the last hour.
I wrote in my notes, this movie is designed for you to use to prank your enemies. And I will also add that I was looking forward to revisiting it for this assignment out of all the A24 horror movies I could have chosen, because I thought, you know what? This is the one that I really want to watch stoned and see if it hits me any different. And I will say it was probably more fun to watch that way, but I also broke it into, I think, 3 chunks.
Oh, you would have to. I would fall asleep for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, I had to, but I was like, you know what? I want to see if the anxiety hits me any worse. And I really put myself out there for this one. And you know, it still wasn't quite as rewarding as I expected it to be. So I think this is a movie that, like, I'm probably in the minority. I mean, very few people saw this to begin with. I feel like I'm in like a cult for only having watched it twice. But I feel like this is a movie that I couldn't imagine under other circumstances anybody watching more than like once a decade.
Yeah.
You know, you go long enough, kind of like, I don't know, Watchmen is like that for me, where like every few years I'm like, it couldn't have been as bad as I thought it was. It's such a fascinating thing that it even happened. I'm gonna get high and watch it.
I like Watchmen.
Yeah, me too.
I know you do.
No, oh wait, that was poorly timed. I want to just clarify that my Me Too was not aimed at I also like Watchmen, but at that occasionally I have the perverse desire to rewatch it.
You guys can come over anytime you want to watch Watchmen.
That's okay.
All right. So that was BEAU Is Afraid.
That's the movie.
We don't know what we're watching next, but we expect you to chime in.
You're gonna pick for us.
You can pick any A24 movie. It doesn't have to be a horror movie.
We'll accept any genre if you donate enough money. We're gonna be sticking to horror for this new mission during the strike, but to raise money for hardworking folks out there, you can pick whatever the fuck you want, as long as it's A24.
All right, well, it's been nice chatting with you. I'm excited for what surprises await us next episode, my dudes, for every A24 movie on Blu-ray. I've been Steven.
I'm Chris.
I'm Patrick.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.